Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Addict 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Was Chosen by Kushina Uzumaki and the Queens of Konoha, Part 3. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this in common fo next part. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto's eyes bubbled with a dark, powerful lust as he pulled his tongue out his mother's backdoor entrance. Spreading her cheeks wide, he watched as her anus very slowly opened. The opening was a cute little button initially. Then it spread more until it became slightly larger, but not by much. Placing his hands on her sides, he propelled himself forward and began ing her with his tongue. GGHH, roared Kushina as her son kept slamming his face into her bottom. You're really up there, Sochikoi. OFUCCCCCKKKKK. The smacking, wet sounds of Naruto eating his mother's joined the shrieks of her going crazy with pleasure. He made one deep thrust, so deep that he could feel his saliva drying up due to the heat emitting from the depths of her anus. His nose was breathing in the crack of her, his eyes looking past her magnificent butt cheeks and watching her shaking her head violently. Then, he channeled lightning chakra to his tongue. Cried Kushina with a scream so loud that it broke the mirror hanging above the hallway. There was nothing like a woman who could squirt her heart out. A tsunami-like wave of juices gushed from the deepest reaches of her cunt, following her anus tightening around her son's tongue. She pressed her face against the floor, her cheeks mopping the surface as her legs began shaking. The marble floor below her was now caked with the tremendous expulsion of her feminine cream. Yanking his tongue out of his mother's, he took long deep breaths. Had he not been a ninja, he would have died from suffocation with how much time he had spent exploring her anal walls. Speaking of his mother, she collapsed on her side with her big, juicy butt forming a beautiful heart shape. She was laying in a puddle of her own juices. Her violet orbs were squeezed shut. For a good minute she kept shivering, but it took a whole lot longer for her legs to finally stop shaking. Sochikoi, my Kami, you are, oh wow, babbled Minato's wife as she struggled to stay awake. Up and at him, Kaheim, said Naruto as he sat his mother upright and resisted the urge to laugh at her sleepy face. I haven't even begun pleasuring you yet. Did I not mention something about me needing 72 hours? Kushina struggled to bear through the mind-numbing pleasure she was in. Her eyes widened in fear when her son's words finally registered in her mind. There was no way she would be able to handle him. He had made her orgasm twice in the training ground roughly 20 minutes ago and he got her to squirt again just now. How would she be able to survive 3 full days of him breaking in her body? She tried crawling away from her son, only for him to yank her back and slip a finger up her lubricated anal walls. Her erotic whimpers filled the downstairs area of their home as he began sliding his finger in and out of her butt like he was ing her with a tiny, Minato's teeny weenie. XXX. Naruto was now sitting on the living room sofa with his legs spread wide. His mother was on his lap, her big, fat ballooned out on his thighs as she straddled him. An arm was wrapped around her waist, securing her in place. His palm was pressed against the small of her back, set up at an angle that was allowing him to furiously her with his index and middle finger. I'm CUMMMMMINNGGGGGG. It didn't matter that his mother was squirting all over the sofa and drenching his crotch with her delicious juice. Naruto just wasn't satisfied with the amount of orgasms she's had thus far, he wanted her to come like no tomorrow. The speed picked up as he kept jamming his fingers in and out of her rectum to the point his hand became a mere blur. He had to use his other arm to hold her steady because she began shrieking like a siren, spasming like a woman with Tourette syndrome. It wasn't necessarily the insane rhythm that got Kushina to shriek like an over-exaggerating. No, it was the chakra laced in her son's fingers coupled with how hard he would push his fingers in and pull them out. But in Naruto's defense, him being so rough with his mother was his way of ensuring her was nice and stretched for when he would break that'n with his monster. And no, no more, please no, more, no, please, whimpered the Hokage's wife as she slumped into her son's chest, shuddering violently against him. 3 hours. Her son spent the past 3 hours anally probing her and making her orgasm over, and over, and over again. This chain of orgasms has given birth to a river of juices leading from the hallway to the living room. It honestly made sense for them to put up a yellow sign that reads, "Caution, wet floor." He didn't even bother taking off her bra. He just kept giving her a cavity search with his fingers and tongue. She could barely feel her legs or hips. Her was painfully sore. She was feeling lightheaded from the amount of fluids she has discharged in such a small period of time. Let's not even talk about how badly her was begging for a break. "I'm sorry, Kaheim," thought Naruto as he started popped a chakra pill into his mother's mouth and revitalized her energy. But we're just getting started. Massive tits sprang forth from their confinement as Naruto unclasped his mother's bra. Now that he's thoroughly exercised her anal muscles, it was time to milk her ass for all they were worth. Then and only then would he play with her. His monster twitched in his trousers as the two big, OL marshmallows tumbled forward, showing barely any sag, and were capped by painfully erect, rosy pink S. "Beautiful," said Naruto softly, kissing his mother's forehead as he cupped her S. Kushina bit her lips with a pretty blush coloring her cheeks. "Thank you, Sochikoi." He lifted her S, weighing them reverently. Nice and big, yet so soft. Running his thumbs over her S, he saw them twitching in response to his touch. The true worship began as he sank his face in between the mountains on her chest. He moved them, up and down, side to side, against her mouth, and against his. There were no shapes or configurations he didn't form. Then he began kissing and slurping her tit flesh with his swirling swathing tongue, bathing the undersides, the sides, the tops, and even her valley as though the crevice was made of whipped cream. Casting a brief gaze at his gorgeous mother, the blonde saw her eyes fluttering and knew she was absolutely in love with the worship. Lowering his mouth, he took it into his mouth and greedily squeezed it like he wanted to take it home with him. Her other twitched, but he could sense its loneliness. All Kushina could do was fill the living room with her why cries as her son switched back and forth between her tits, teasing, pulling on, and gently biting down on her S. Suddenly, Naruto grabbed hard on his mother's tits, making her whimper. "Will Two-san ever get a chance to these girls again?" "And no, never," said Kushina as she threw her head back. They're yours now, all yours." "Good," was all Naruto said in response before he smashed his face between his mother's huge tits and smothered himself in her valley, her sweet scent filling his nostrils. Lick, nibble, repeat. By the time he was done, her huge tits were coated with saliva. She even made a mess of his trousers as she had creamed all over him. He chuckled as she looked away from him. His mother was one adorable MILF. Turning her head, he smashed his lips against hers, all while holding her enormous. She began swaying her motherly hips, unknowingly giving him a lap dance. Strands of spit connected their mouths to their lips as they finally pulled back from one another. Pecking her on the cheek, he used his upper body strength to hoist her up and lay her across his drenched lap. For the time being he hadn't yanked down his trousers, so his furious monster was throbbing and flexing against his mother's stomach as she rested on top of him. Chakra was then channeled to his right bicep. A small poof sound filled the room and out in his hand appeared a jar full of fresh blueberries. By the time Minato's wife put two and two together, her son was resting the fruit against her perineum. Time stood still for her as he propped up her and spread the folds of her little anus. He rolled her buttocks over and over, opening her wider so he could rectally feed her a blueberry. She tried her best to stop him, but moving around was helping him since she was unconsciously clenching and unclenching her anus. Within a minute's passing, all that was peeking out of her was the stem of the blueberry. Pull it out," whined Kushina adorably as she covered her atomic red face with her hands. This was the most embarrassing thing that has ever happened to her. Naruto laughed warmly at his innocent mother. There was so much he needed to teach her. When he was a child, she taught him how to read and write. Now as an adult, he was going to return the favor by teaching her about the vast wonders of kinks, fetishes, positions. There was so much knowledge he wanted to impart on her. If only his father hadn't neglected his mother. If only he would have honored his duties as a husband. Minato's mistakes have cost him his wife. And now he will never get her back. Staring down at his cute mother, he pecked her on the cheek and nodded at her. Scooping her up, he manhandled her until she was kneeling on the cushion while her arms were dangling over the sofa. Pulling her cheeks apart, he went to work on retrieving the blueberry. For 30 seconds he swooshed her buttocks around as he massaged them to get her to relax. She spasmed again as his lips closed over her, and she instinctively released the fruit into his waiting mouth. Murmured Naruto while savoring the blueberry, treasuring the distinct pungent taste of his mother's anal canal mixing with the fruit's natural juice. Kushina threw her head over her shoulder, blushing harder than she ever has in her life. Her son had just gotten her to open for her favorite fruit. Then he pulled it out and popped it in his mouth. Now he was grinning foxily at her like what he did was the most normal thing in the world. He was corrupting her, and she found herself loving every second of it. Suddenly, her mouth fell when she saw her son waving at her with a new blueberry in between his index finger and thumb. Every hair on her body stood as he proceeded to unseal a familiar food item, a can of whipped cream. A dark smirk curled to his lips as his mother tried covering her with her hands. Like I said, I haven't even begun pleasuring you, Kaheim. XXX. My office is being renovated. The meeting in Grass Country was going phenomenally well. This trade agreement would ensure that Konoha's agriculture will prosper for the next 50 years. He was surprised when Fugaku volunteered himself to be an escort for this mission. However, he was more than happy to accept the offer since Jiraiya was going to be his second escort. Thankfully, his former teacher has kept a wrap on his super pervert tendencies all through their stay in the country of agriculture. But as soon as they got to their hotel, a crow was waiting for them in their suite. Affirmative, Hokage-sama, answered Itachi through his crow summon. I can vividly recall mentioning this to you last weekend. Have you forgotten about it already? Murmured the blonde. Maybe I forgot. The crow just stared blankly at the blonde. The Hokage Tower will be under lockdown until the renovation is complete. Therefore, I've sent Mato-san here to deliver some of the paperwork you'll have to finalize over these next 2 days. Ah yes, I remember now, said Minato as he nodded along. The crow nodded at him before releasing a scroll, which he took into his hand. Thanks, Itachi. It's my pleasure, Hokage-sama, said Itachi. By your leave. The crow dispelled and Fugaku held back his smirk. Excellent work, Sochi. Jiraiya was amused as well, but didn't let it show. The renovation was just a ruse to keep Minato from his office so Naruto could initiate the final stage of his plan. It was time for him to play his part now. Minato, said Jiraiya as seriously as he could. Why don't you just take your paperwork and finish it at home? I'm sure your wife will appreciate you finally being there for her. A big blush colored Minato's features from thinking about making love to his wife. He hasn't been there for her for a long time. Now he could get a chance to take her in the missionary position again. Why yeah, stammered the yellow flash before he took off like a speed bullet and slammed the bathroom door behind him. Unfortunately for him, his two companions caught on to his plight. Jiraiya shook his head. I almost feel sorry for him. Is it because he went to go jerk off or because he's going to get cuckolded by Naruto-sama? Queried Fugaku with a dark smirk. Jiraiya chuckled a little, though his eyes did hold some pity. I just hope he doesn't break. XXX. Makoto Uchiha rolled around in her bed with tears welling in her onyx orbs. Despite giving her lover the green signal to pursue his dreams of claiming his mother, she was horrified with the idea that she might be tossed aside for Kushina. These past 5 years with Naruto have been the best years of her life. He was the perfect man, not because of his monster or his amazing physique. No, it's because they're soulmates and they can talk to each other about anything and everything. She's told him her deepest and darkest secrets, none of which have ever reached her husband's ears. Hell, she's even told him stuff that she hasn't even revealed to her best friend. He treats her like a queen, always showers her with love and goes out of his way to make her happy. It wasn't just extravagant purchases. It was the roses he would lay near her bed each morning, or how he would kiss her as soon as she woke up and right before she drifted asleep. The little things count, but he's done so many of them for her that she could not count them all. Therefore, she thought she would return the favor and help him achieve his goal of stealing Kushina from Minato. That was in theory. But this is reality. Rubbing her watery eyes, she fiddled with the hem of the oversized shirt she had on. To her, this was the comfiest shirt in the whole world. Aside from its comfy factor, she enjoyed how it fell just below her gorgeous bubble butt. This gave her long, slender legs a lot of room to breathe. But the most important reason why she loved this shirt was because it was her lover's. He had tossed it into the hamper before jumping into the shower with her this morning. She could still smell his manly scent on the garment. The love of her life was with another woman and it was eating her up inside. For better or for worse, this woman was her best friend, her surrogate sister, the girl she had grown up with. Had it been for a woman other than Kushina, she would have outright denied her lover from thinking about ditching her to chase new tail. If there was anyone who she could trust with her lover, it was her best friend. However, it was still difficult for her to imagine another woman sinking her claws in her man. Suddenly, she heard her bedroom door creaking open and immediately turned on her side so she wouldn't be facing the door. She knew her lover had just stepped inside because he had set up a fuinjutsu security system for their bedroom. If the door is closed, only the person whose blood is registered can open it. On top of that, the seals carved on the floor, walls, ceiling and window prevents anyone from breaking in via Shunshin no Jutsu. Shortly after making a cuckold out of her husband, Naruto told him that he was no longer permitted entry inside the master bedroom. Fugaku wasn't even allowed to see his wife having with the man she was cheating on him with unless they personally let him inside the bedroom. Long story short, this door will not open unless Naruto or Makoto are the ones yanking down on the handle. Naruto stepped inside his precious mate's bedroom with a soft smile gracing his whiskered features. Makoto was laying on her tummy, uncovered. His heart raced as he saw her in his shirt. She always looked so in his clothes. The garment was bunched up around her waist, leaving her panty covered in full display for him. Her buttocks were slightly spread and since the light black undergarment was pretty much see-through, he had a clear view of her crack in the cleft of her vulva. His monster stirred in his pants from gazing at the ring of her cute little anus and the folds of her inner labia peeking out from between her thicker, rich pink outer labia lips. I see someone wants to get Ed, cooed Naruto as he propped down beside his lover and curled his body around her until they were spooning. Makoto answered her lover with a cute huff. What's wrong? Asked the blonde, his voice laced in genuine concern. Is this about me coupling with Kaheim? All the MILF could do was sniffle. She had received word from her lover's shadow clone that Kushina had hightailed it out of the training ground. A part of her was happy to hear this because she thought her friend might take some time to process things. However, shortly after that, she was told by a new shadow clone that Kushina was broken enough that she was okay with cheating on Minato with Naruto. Hearing that new honorific from her lover reminded her that she's no longer his one and only princess. She would have to face the reality that she has to share him. It's kind of hypocritical for me to act out like this now, whispered the MILF. After all, I was the one who came up with the idea of allowing Kushina-chan to catch you and I having. I've also brainstormed countless seduction methods with you so you could win her over. Her voice broke here. I just didn't think I would actually have to share you. A frown marred Naruto's face as he tilted Sasuke's mother's head and brushed away her tears. He slowly peeled down his trousers, setting free his monster. Hitching up her shirt and bunching it around her midriff, he proceeded to pull down her panties. Once they dangled around her thighs, he slowly spread the two symmetrical spheres of her bottom before wedging his massive shaft between them. She wiggled her childbearing hips, smothering him in big, deliciously juicy cheeks. I'm so sorry I'm putting you through this, said the blonde. Sharing is not fair to the women involved, but you two mean the world to me. I cannot stand the thought of you being with your husband. This is why I stole you from Fugaku-san. My feelings for Ka-Heim is why I'm going to make a cuck out of Tu-san as well. A devilish gleam sparkled in his eyes from just thinking about having with his mother behind his father's back. But I love you so much that it hurts. You own a part of my heart that Ka-Heim will never own. You're irreplaceable, Miko Heim. A soft smile curled to the woman's lips. You silver-tongued playboy. Well, I do like to play, and you never complain about my tongue, cooed Naruto as he gently drove his to and fro the bridge between his woman's buttocks. But I really do love you, Miko Heim. It's heartbreaking to see you like this. Makoto tilted her head with her flushed cheeks puffing out as she gazed deeply at her lover. It was unreal how he could turn her entire day around with just a few words. She was feeling so devastated earlier, but he somehow managed to absorb all that pain and shower her with his comfort. Pushing her neck up slightly, she brushed her lips against his. I love you, Naru-koi, said the woman softly. So where's Kushina now? Naruto smiled at his best friend's mother. I love you too. As far as Ka-Heim goes, I gave her an hour to rest. I've been playing with heron tits ever since I got back home. Black orbs widened as Makoto glanced at the nearby clock. 7, no 8, muttered the beautiful Kunoichi. 8 hours on Justand worship. Damn right, replied Naruto smugly. I even stuck a blueberry up her and ate it in front of her. The master bedroom shook with thunderous laughter as Makoto held her ribs, cackling like a nefarious villain about to up the hero's day. She could picture that scenario so well. The tomboy red-haired motormouth rambling on about ramen, only to be shut up with a blueberry being shoved up her hindquarters. Oh, the evil plans that were now hatching inside her head. Kushina will never hear the end of this. Ah, has Miko Heim forgotten all about the strawberry incident? The laughter stopped as the color evaporated from the Uchiha matriarch's face. A humongous blush rushed to her cheeks from recalling that very memory. Back then, she was really reluctant to let Naruto play with her because she was a virgin back there. Then one day, he flipped her over and forced a strawberry up her little hole. He didn't stop there. No sir. He kept ing and tonguing her until her anal walls were all smeared with the fruity sensation. Only after that did he starting her clean. To this day she can't look at a strawberry and not clench her. Be baka, grumbled the mother, refusing to face her lover. Naruto chuckled at the adorable MILF and held her protectively. His eyes brimmed with love as he ran his right hand around her lips while continuing to the crevice of her glorious. You just need to wait a little longer, said Naruto as he nipped the skin of his lover's neck. Once I finally consummate my relationship with Ka-Heim, I'll be in the position where I can fulfill the promise I made to you on our first-year anniversary. Makoto tilted her head again, this time with a beautiful smile gracing her features. Tears were flowing down her cheeks from just thinking about carrying her godson's child. Without another word, she fully turned around and crashed her lips against his, pulling him in one of the fiercest kisses they've ever shared. Their forehead pressed together, their eyes locked, their genitals embracing. He cared so much about her that he showed up here to comfort her, even when he has the perfect opportunity to snuggle with his mother. If he was going to put such effort, then the least she can do is follow in his example. XXX. Kushina Uzumaki found herself drowning as outrageous waves of water attacked her from all sides. Violent thunderstorms were booming in the background. She tried protecting herself by forming an adamantine chain barrier, but was unable to even gather enough chakra. The last time she felt so hopeless was when she was a little girl and Uzushiogakure was getting struck down by enemy villages. Suddenly, her eyes shot wide open and she awoke with a thunderous gasp. Her huge tits bounced with frenzy as she took deep breaths to calm herself. Even though she was finally awake, for some reason there was no strength left in her body. She was pretty much paralyzed on the bed. The last thing I remember was Sochikoi giving me a bath and then putting me to bed. Her thoughts were broken by her lips getting brushed by a thick, wet brush. What happened wasn't a dream. Those violent tidal waves had been conjured by her mind to show her the sheer power of her latest orgasm. Apparently, Her son had made her gush like an overpaid whore while she was asleep. She had to summon all the strength she had to cast her gaze down. It was then she saw his spiky blonde hair between her legs, which were both hoisted over his shoulders. He had a devilish twinkle in his cerulean blue orbs as he winked at her before burying his face back in her snatch. His index finger was running in little ovals around her labia, occasionally brushing by her cute. His tongue was quite far up inside her, massaging her vaginal walls and trying to extract more essence out of her. For the next couple of minutes, the tip of his tongue began lashing at a particularly sweet spot hidden deep within her cunt. It was only a few years ago that she discovered this pleasure point while masturbating. However, her son somehow managed to find it with no trouble. He was truly skilled. SS Sochikoi, whimpered Kushina, her head spinning with pleasure. Please, let me rest. Not a chance, Kaheim, said Naruto as he withdrew his tongue from his mother's passage. I've been waiting for years to taste your sweet. Besides, I've given you 1 hour to rest, which is more than enough. Now it's time for me to get back to work. Of course, he hadn't mentioned that while Kushina was napping, he snuck out of the house to tuck Sasuke's mother into bed. Makoto was still a little iffy about sharing him, and he's been with her for the past 5 years. So why would his mother be fine with sharing him right off the bat? Only by playing it slow could he hope to one day create an understanding between his two lovers. After getting back home, he headed straight to his parents' bedroom. He had to fight the urge to yank down his trousers and shove his straight up his mother's when he saw how cute she looked while snoring in her sleep. However, the closer he got to her, the stronger the smell of her arousal got. She was having a wet dream and was murmuring his name. Spreading her legs, he saw her beautiful pink labia lips glistening with thick, creamy nectar. Of course he was going to eat that. Minato's wife was once again reminded that her husband wasn't a fraction of the man their son was. He had spent almost 8 hours just exploring her and playing with her tits. She could still feel her ass aching from how hard he had ed on them after spraying whipped cream on them. Even her puckered up from recalling how much whipped cream he had sprayed directly inside her little hole. Violet orbs flickered as her son greedily consumed her vagina. His tongue felt so damn good inside her, but the pleasure kicked into high gear when he pressed down on her sensitive like a button. She felt him channeling chakra, but hadn't anticipated for him to use it to elongate his tongue. The increase in length was allowing her son to reach depths her husband was never able to explore. Her tantalizing S filled the master bedroom as she squirmed around on the bedsheets while her son began tonguing her. Fuick, cried Kushina as her son flicked her. I'm gonna come. HMMMHM. Was all Naruto could mumble, for he had become too addicted to his mother's to pull out of her now. He ed-anded, running his tongue up and down her, pushing his mouth and face into her as hard as he could, venturing his tongue deep into the sacred tunnel leading to her womb. The erect orus throbbing out of its hood was getting clobbered by his thumb and pinched in between his two fingers. Had Naruto been a civilian, his throat would have been throbbing, and lungs would have been flaming up. Thankfully, he was no civilian, he had his handy-dandy chakra to keep him from suffocating. People called her Lady Kushina and saw her as the role model for young girls. Too bad they couldn't see her thrusting her hips like letting out unladylike screams of ecstasy. Too bad they couldn't see that she was cheating on their precious Hokage-sama. She masturbated regularly, but her son somehow knew how to pleasure her better than she could pleasure herself. Where has he gained these skills? To think her best friend was getting such treatment. No wonder why Makoto was so addicted to Naruto. Her body tightened, childbearing hips jumping with his movement, hands gripping the pillow under her head shaking back and forth as she chased the orgasm out from where he worked her body to the ends of her toes, fingertips, and head. I'm comin' in GGGGGG. For a good 2 minutes, Minato's wife kept spasming all over her bed, rolling back and forth like she just got tasered. Waves of thick cream started gushing out of her like a tsunami. Her S continued echoing through the bedroom as she laid on her side with post-orgasm shaking legs. Her eyes were glossed with pleasure, Everything else happening around her became a blur to her. She opened her eyes, only to shut them back with desire. All she had seen was a glimpse, but that one glimpse of her son's bare chest was able to ignite a fire in her loins. The sound of clothes hitting the floor made her desires jump higher and higher until she found herself staring at him with half-lidded eyes. This man used to be a small baby that she had carried in her womb for 9 months. Now he was sporting such a spectacularly fit body that could make women foam at the mouth with lust. She was no exception. His protruding chest was boiling with muscles. His pecs held a curvy, yet rigid texture. Sochi-koi is so hot, thought Kushina in a daze as she crawled towards her son. Her right hand trickled down his chiseled chest as she began caressing the carved muscles that came with endless hours of training. It excited her to feel his hard flesh spool beneath her shaky palms. Before she knew it, he removed her hands from his body before taking a few steps back. Ecstasy brewed deep within her mind as he dropped his trousers and his monster came charging out with anger. It sprung free, hitting his stomach with a thud loud enough that it sent chills down her spine. Now it was gutting upwards at her and she was getting high off its musky scent, she could smell it from here. The gigantic mushroom head was oozing a thick cream while beyond it the massive girth of the shaft disappeared into small blonde curls. Beneath the pubic hair dangled a huge pair of testicles. It was crazy that just one of her son's balls could dwarf the size of her husband's wiener. Comparing those two was truly like comparing a pebble to a mountain. "Oh Kami-sama," murmured Kushina with her eyes brimming with lust. Even though she had seen her sons twice already, she had never seen it up close like this. It looked even more intimidating in person, but it was that very fear which was arousing her. "Am I bigger than 2-san?" asked Naruto as he walked towards his mother. Kushina gulped as her son's terrifyingly huge swung around, smacking against his thighs as he took those few steps closer towards her. Her toes curled as that one-eyed beast pointed up at her. It was for the first time that she saw a big blue vein running along the underside of his massive shaft. This made her throb and clench. Her son was simply pulsing with power. "Am I bigger than 2-san?" repeated the blonde, glaring at his mother. There was no need for him to even ask this question, let alone repeat it. He knew exactly how small his father was. He just wanted his mother to say it. He wanted his mother to vocally shame her husband. Swallowing the lump in her throat, Minato's wife whispered a timid, "He's a baby compared to you." "Good," said Naruto with a deep, husky voice. "It's time for you to me off, Kaheim." But you are," rambled Kushina as she looked down at her lap. "You're too huge, Sochi-koi. There's no way I can fit you in my mouth." "Not now at least," corrected the blonde as he grabbed both his mother's hands and guided them to his crotch. "But don't worry, I'm going to guide you through every step of the way. Let's start by you jacking me off." Getting a blowjob from his mother was one of his wildest dreams. Now it was about to come true. Kushina let out a breath she didn't know she had as her hands landed on her son's upper left and right inner thighs respectively. From what she could gather, her fingers wouldn't even meet around his girth. Hence, she would absolutely have to use both her hands to service him. She glanced up at him before staring down at her wedding ring, trying to justify what she was about to do. Taking a deep breath, she reached out and traced the precum from his urethra with her fingertip before smearing it all around the mushroom head. Her hands were shaking, her palms starting to sweat because this was the first time she was touching a that wasn't her husband's. Unlike Minato's soft erections, her son's was so hard that she could hammer nails with it. Unlike Minato's wiener which she could easily wrap a hand around, she was forced to use both hands to meet Naruto's girth. She glanced up at him again and saw him nodding at her, confirming he was liking her soft touch. Feeling at ease with his smile, she sent her fingers back for more of his precum and spread all that juice along the smooth underside of his shaft. Satisfied she had somewhat lubricated his, she began stroking her palm up and down from the juncture with his balls to the prominent ridge behind the head. She felt his throb against her palms and saw the head swelling up even bigger and its eye opening and closing with each pump she gave him. This was hypnotizing for her. Ah, yes, groaned Naruto as he closed his eyes. Keep stroking my Kaheim. Her hands moved in somewhat of a steady rhythm, though she knew her movement was sloppy at best. It was difficult using both hands at once, but thankfully her kunoichi training was paying off. She could sense his chakra reacting to her touch. From what she could sense, he was more pleased with her performing long strokes rather than quick ones. Chewing on her bottom lip, she pressed her thighs together. She was dripping wet and it was an effect of her hand servicing him. The rhythm eventually smoothened out as she moved her hands up and down. She also followed his instructions to occasionally use one of her hands to wrap her fingers over and thumb under the top side of his shaft, while the other hand would stay still. However, he was so huge that she just couldn't get her fingers to touch the tip of her thumb. You're doing well so far, said Naruto fondly as he patted his mother's head. Now take my balls in your hands and play with them. Kushina did as told and held both balls in her palms and bounced them, amazed at how heavy they were. This made her wonder how much jism was stored inside them. Memories of her spying on her son and best friend having came back to her in a flashback. She shuddered at recalling how much semen she saw oozing out of Makoto's in. Naruto had really filled Sasuke's mother to the brim. She bit her lips, realizing that she would soon be full of her son's spunk as well. Now, commanded Naruto as he grabbed hold of his and directed it at his mother's mouth. Open up, Kaheim. Taking one final deep breath, Minato's wife nodded at her son before opening her lips as wide as she could. Unfortunately, it didn't fit. She tried again, this time stretching her jaw until it hurt, but it was still no use. Like she had already told her son, he had one ing giant. However, there was no way she was going to stop here. After all the pleasure he's given her thus far, she had to return the favor. The second attempt began with her swooshing his big balls inside her mouth one by one, until both were slathered with her saliva. She grinned up at him while he shot her a smirk. He obviously loved that stimulation and she was elated to do that for him. From there she traced the length of his shaft with her tongue. She went for a back and forth motion whiling him, all while conjuring up ways to take that massive head inside her. Unfortunately, this attempt didn't go any better. Not even at its widest point was she able to stretch her lips far enough to engulf his thick mushroom head. Her jaw was aching from being worked so hard, so she decided to move her tongue back to ease the head of his gigantic inside her mouth. It was still a no-go, though this was an improvement from last time. Her eyes flickered in lust as her nostrils picked up on his musky scent. She hurriedly wrapped both hands around his shaft and began stroking both fists rapidly, earning her a few groans. Moving her hands down to the base, she opened her mouth as wide as possible and tried drawing into her oral caverns. Infuriated that all her efforts were in vain, she wrapped her arms around his waist before slamming her head forward, forcing the rest of his head to get shoved into her mouth. But like that meme, it was at that moment she knew she had ed up. Within a matter of seconds, searing pains were felt from the sides of her mouth as her lips started tearing to accommodate the beast she was getting stretched with. Blood started oozing from her torn lip and having her mouth open so wide was making things even worse. Tears welled in her eyes as she wiggled her head, trying to push him out of her. Oh shit, said Naruto in alarm as he held his mother's head steady and pulled his out of her mouth. Quickly crouching down towards her, a frown marred his face to see the blood leaking from her bottom lip. He quickly began channeling medicinal chakra to his hand. The wound was minor, and he was able to heal it with no problem whatsoever. One of the prostitutes he used to was a medic and she taught him some basic healing techniques. By doing this, she saved the lives of her fellow whores because the whiskered blonde didn't stop until he had broken in every single in that whorehouse. At least his past conquests were beneficial in the long run. Gently kissing his mother's forehead, Naruto pulled her in his arms. I'm sorry, Kaheim. I should have been more attentive and not forced you to push so hard. You have nothing to apologize for, sniffled Kushina as she affectionately wiggled her nose against her son's own. You weren't forcing yourself on me. I shouldn't have gotten so overconfident, nor should I have acted on instincts like that. The fact remains that you are just too huge, Sochikoi. I sort of wish I wasn't so big right now, muttered the blonde. Do you want to stop here then? Exclaimed Kushina as she stared at her son like he was stupid. Why, this just makes me try even harder. There's no way I'm going to accept defeat, Databane. There's no way I'll lose to Makoto, added the mother mentally as she recalled her best friend being able to deep-throat Naruto. How the woman was able to do it was beyond her, but she didn't care. She wanted her son to stop seeing her best friend, so she needed to learn how to pleasure him better than every other woman on this planet. Naruto grinned lustfully as he slapped his mother's forehead with the head of his, creating a small thud sound and earning a squeak from her. Then let's try this again. Close your eyes. Kushina stared at her son for a moment before nodding at him, deciding to obey his order. Violet orbs squinted slightly before all she could see was black. We're now at Ichiraku Ramen and, hey wait. Is that the Kushina Uzumaki special? The redhead bounced up and down on her bed, the weapons of mass destruction on her chest jiggling and erect S pointing in varying directions. This was roleplay, she knew this. However, it always excited her whenever the giant bowl of ramen named after her was brought up. Open wide, said Naruto as he brushed the head of his against his mother's lips. Here comes the Uzumaki train. It was quite exhilarating to be doing this with his mother. In the past, she used to feed him with a spoon by doing all sorts of amusing hand gestures and speaking in a funny voice. Now after all these years, he's feeding her his. Before she knew it, Minato's wife had her son's massive head inside her mouth, her hands fully meeting around the base of his shaft. She stared up at him with widened eyes and realized what he had done. Her technique had failed earlier because she was forcing herself to drag him inside her oral passage. However, the trick was to use chakra and not worry about how to accommodate him. Saliva started pooling inside of her mouth to the point where it not only lubricated his head, but also began leaking from the corner of her mouth. Kami, growled Naruto as he ran a hand through his mother's hair. You look so ingwai with my in your mouth, Kaheim. Kushina stared up at her son with lust-filled eyes as his ignited her wet caverns with its intense heat. Feeling her love for him skyrocket, she gently pulled him out and leaned forward to plant a lingering kiss on his head. This submissive act earned her a gentle scalp massage from her son, which only heightened the arousal she was in. It felt so natural for her to be worshipping him like this. The next hour was a blur to her. It took some time to take 4 inches of him inside her, but even after all that effort, she couldn't give him a good blowjob because of how thick he was. Despite this, she kept slobbering over the massive length like an excited dog and had gagged on it multiple times. What truly astonished her was that she kept ing her son off for an hour straight, yet he was still painfully hard and was refusing to ejaculate. Blowing Minato was like taking candy from a baby, which was a good metaphor to use since her husband had a baby. It took less than 2 minutes getting him to squirt a few drops of cum. Naruto's stamina was beyond anything she's ever seen. Fear started engulfing her as she pictured him hating her for not pleasuring him properly. She feared he would go back to Makoto if she didn't pick up the pace. That was when she really got into her groove and started furiously jacking him off with her hands. Then, she suddenly took all she could into her mouth and went away like an eager. She only grew more motivated as he held her head and thrust it a little deeper inside her. At the end of the day, she was only able to handle 6 inches of his monster. However, relentlessly slathering up those 6 inches was still able to help her win the prize she was competing for. I'm coming, roared Naruto as he unleashed all hell on his mother. He was channeling medicinal chakra to prevent himself from ejaculating, but now it was time for him to grace her with his semen. He wanted this one orgasm to change his mother's life. And change Kushina's life it did. Kushina coughed out globs of semen as she was unable to handle the amount being torpedoed down her throat. The Hokage's wife was now being hit with ropes upon ropes of potent jism. The first connected with her face, catching a few strands of her hair along the way. Her chin, nose and mouth were next until even her s were caked with her son's musky spunk. She watched wide-eyed as her son kept spraying her like a water hose and she just welcomed it like rain in Sunagaker. By the end of it all, the question of what Kushina Uzumaki would look like as a yeti was answered. So much, babbled Minato's wife as she moved her sticky hands around. Sorry about that, said Naruto with a chuckle while handing his mother a towel. I was backed up for the past day or so. But you look pretty all smeared with my cum. Kushina blushed as she dabbed the towel on her sticky skin. There's still so much I have left to clean, Databane. How about we take a shower, Sochikoi? I love that idea, said Naruto with a foxy grin. Let's have some more fun in the shower, Kaheim. A schoolgirlish squeal escaped Kushina as her son spanked her with the palm of his hand with such force that she jumped a foot into the air. The magnificent spheres of her bottom jiggled with frenzy as she placed her feet back on the carpet. She glared at him with atomic red cheeks, though both the cheeks on her face and bottom were sharing the same cerise hue. She grumbled as he shot her a foxy grin and led her to the bathroom. During this time, she started remembering something he had grunted out when she was stroking his earlier. She hadn't paid too much attention to his words back then because she was so caught up with pleasuring him. However, the mention of fun made her recall what he said, and his words began repeating over and over inside her head. I'm going to have so much fun making a cuck out of Tucson. XXX. 60 hours have passed since Naruto started playing with his mother behind his father's back. In those 60 hours, Naruto was able to revive a chunk of his mother's confidence. Out of those 60 hours, he only allowed her to nap for a total of 3 hours. A short recess would be given for food and bathroom breaks, but the vast majority of their time was spent on him pleasuring her. However, at no point did they consummate their relationship. He wanted to build her UAL appetite by continuously making her orgasm. This would help improve her stamina in bed in the long run. After all, he didn't want her to pass out every time he slammed her down on his. He was even able to teach her how to take more of his in her mouth. She was getting better, but she still had a lot of work ahead of her. Kushina Uzumaki was now a changed woman, but no woman would stay the same after hitting a little over 100 orgasms in a span of just 60 hours. At first, she was hesitant about cheating on her husband. Now she couldn't dream of going back to that flaky man when she had a stronger and wire stud by her side. Her son had opened her eyes to the pleasure she's been denied her whole life. All she was worried about now was how she would break this news to her husband. The duo were now sitting on the living room carpet watching a romance film. Koyuki Kazuhana was one of Naruto's numerous female friends and she had sent them an early release of her new Lady in Red movie. This would be the first movie she's done outside of the Princess Gale series. Kushina hummed happily as she sat on her son's lap, smothering his monster in big, fat, juicy cheeks. The one-eyed beast throbbed beneath her, wanting her to on it some more. But it would have to wait until later tonight to get serviced. She's already given him 2 blowjobs today. Any more and her jaw will dislocate from getting worked overtime. A soft sigh escaped her as she snuggled with him, her mind at ease as his arms were wrapped around her taut tummy. Kushina-chan, I'm home. Violet orbs shot wide open as Kushina heard her husband's voice from the hallway. She thought he wasn't going to return for another 2 days. Her heart paced like no tomorrow from just thinking about getting caught red-handed by Minato. She shot a quick glance back at her son, only for him to shake his head and hold her tight. He was not showing any sign of nervousness, it was like he was prepared for his father's sudden arrival. Okay, at least we're fully clothed right now, thought Kushina as she hurriedly looked herself over. On the plus side, we're all wrapped up under a blanket so he can't tell that I'm not wearing a bra or panties. It's not even hiding my relationship with Sochikoi that's the problem. I didn't expect for Minato to come home so early. This was all according to Naruto's plan. Earlier this morning, Naruto was informed by Jiraiya via Toad Summon that they would be back in Konoha at around 11 p.m. He and his mother have been for the past 50 hours, so it was a shock to Kushina when Naruto told her to wear a shirt and trouser today. This was done so his father could catch them watching a movie all snuggled up, but not be able to sense anything amiss. Meanwhile, Minato hurried to the living room when the sounds of erotic struck his eardrums. To his relief, he saw his wife and son wrapped under a blanket watching television. Apparently the two were watching some sort of romance film. What caught his eye the most was how radiantly his wife was glowing. It made his jaw drop slightly because she looked like an angel right now. What he didn't know was that this glow was actually a UAL afterglow. The journey back to Konoha was eventful. After the Hokage finished signing the documents for the Grass Country Konoha Treaty, he and his escorts greeted the daimyo before making their way towards their home village. The daimyo had requested them to stay one more night, but Jiraiya wanted to leave as soon as possible so he could continue his research. Staring at his son, Minato saw a bigger, fitter version of himself. 4 years ago, Naruto had a similar flaky build as him. Now the younger blonde was more muscular, but nowhere near as freakishly muscular like the Raikage. It actually suited him. But just the sight of his adult son made him depressed. He knew he wasn't the worst father, but he also knew he wasn't going to win any Father of the Year awards anytime soon. Not a single time did he take Naruto to the academy or pick him up. So many birthdays he's missed because of unscheduled appointments and meetings. So many breakfasts and dinners he had to miss because he just couldn't get out of paperwork. He was ashamed that he had several opportunities to make it up to his son, yet he always found a reason to stay in his office instead. However, as Hokage, the village was more important than family. Everyone in the village can be sacrificed for the greater good, even his loved ones. Unfortunately, his wife and son were completely against his beliefs and just didn't see things from his point of view. He loved them both, but he refused to play civilian family with them. Him not being home was necessary for Konoha's survival. "Hey, Kushina-chan, Sochi," said Minato as he stood by the covered-up couple. "What are you two doing?" It took all he had not to kiss his wife. He was sure the redhead was extremely upset with him leaving for Grass Country and not bothering to inform her about it. Then again, by keeping his mouth shut, he prevented his wife from blabbing about this treaty to her friends. He loved her, but he couldn't trust her with village secrets. This was for the greater good in his opinion. "Hey, Minato," began Kushina, struggling to find her voice since her son was rubbing her inner thighs under the blanket. We're watching a romance movie sent to us by Koyuki-chan," interrupted Naruto, preventing his father from suspecting anything. "The storyline is fascinating." Minato nodded along, though he wasn't too interested in the romance movie. His wife and son both knew he wasn't much of a movie person. "Do you mind if I joined you too?" asked the blonde as he scratched the back of his head. "I guess I won't have enough room in that blanket from what it looks like." "Feel free to take the sofa, too-san," said Naruto casually as he hooked his thumbs under the hem of his mother's shirt. "Ka-chan and I are too comfortable where we are to move right now." It did pain the blonde to revert to Ka-chan, rather than Ka-heim, but he would have to endure the mental torture for now. Kushina swallowed the lump in her throat, her breathing becoming labored as her son's hands crept up the hem of her shirt. First, he tickled her sides, running his palms up and down with such finesse that she started feeling goosebumps all over her. His hand suddenly jumped to the undersides of her tits and she had to channel her inner kunoichi to steal her emotions. But no training could help her, for when her son cupped her huge tits and began massaging them, she had to stuff her face into her left shoulder to avoid letting her husband see her face contorting with pleasure. Naruto was like a doctor when it came to the operations he's performed on her chest thus far. He's ed them, bit them, bounced them in his hands. Just this morning he took things even further by stuffing his monster in the valley of her S. He ed her tits so hard today that she could still feel the friction burn. She let out a breath she didn't know she had as he took her S in between two fingers. He began tweaking them, all while squeezing the sides of her S with his palms. Her back arched, her sparkling with juice as he fondled the orbs that used to feed him when he was an infant. Thankfully, this was all done under the blanket. She also had her hands pushed out against the blanket to prevent her husband from sighting any suspicious movements from their behalf. "Why, yeah, we are too comfy," stammered Kushina, trying her best to fight back her s. Minato couldn't help but feel angry at his son for failing to look underneath the underneath. When he asked to join them, he was actually requesting Naruto to sit elsewhere while he snuggled with his wife. He wanted nothing more than to make it up to her for leaving her high and dry by heading off to grass country. Saying anything now would just dampen their mood, especially since Kushina was in approval of what their son had said. He sighed as he propped down on the sofa and stretched out his legs. Since the two were all wrapped up in a blanket, it didn't occur to him until now that his wife was actually sitting on their son's lap. He knew how close they were, but this was a little too close for a mother and son. It was fine when Naruto was a young boy, but his wife shouldn't be sitting on a grown man's lap unless it's his. He'll have to speak to her about this later in private. Shaking his head, the fourth Hokage turned his attention back to the television, completely unaware that his wife was getting her huge tits massaged by their son. "Oh, I'm soaking wet now," thought Kushina with glossed eyes. Her son had stopped playing with her tits about 2 minutes ago and was now circling his palm around her. "It's only a matter of time until Sochikoi makes me orgasm, but I can't let Minato hear me." The red-haired Kunoichi leaned a little to the side so she could cast a brief gaze at her son. He returned her stare with a devilish twinkle in his cerulean blue orbs. Her eyes shot wide open as he gave her a small peck on her lips. Her heart paced at 1,000,000 miles per second as she looked to her husband, who was thankfully oblivious to that kiss. She breathed heavily while leaning back to glare at her son for doing such a risky thing out in the open like this. There were no words needed from his behalf because it was obvious he planned to make her cum with her oblivious husband nearby. Suddenly, her son removed his hand from her cunt, earning a soft groan of disappointment from her. It was then he clasped his hands around the waistband of her trousers. Both his thumbs hooked under the sides of her trousers. Before she knew it, he was peeling down her trousers under the blanket. "Could you lift yourself up, Ka-chan?" asked Naruto, loud enough for his father to hear. "The blanket is bunching up." Kushina whimpered as lust started overpowering every shred of willpower she had. This was so dangerous, but she couldn't deny the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She nervously raised her bottom and her son wasted no time in stripping her. Ripples ran through her gorgeous bubble butt as her trousers were peeled under the cup of her derriere. Now the garment dangled around her thighs. She paid a brief glance at her husband, who arched a brow at her before turning back to watch the movie. Little by little, Naruto kept pulling down his mother's trousers, but the position they were in was making things a little difficult for him. Thankfully, she decided to lean forward and by doing so it helped him slip the garment over her knees. Kushina picked up where her son left off by fully tugging on her trousers until they slithered around the carpet. She was now from the waist down. "Do you want me to lift myself up too, Ka-chan?" asked Naruto, again in a loud, confident voice. "Hi," said Kushina, barely able to contain her wicked excitement. "That will help." 14½ inches of rock-hard steel sprang free from its prison as Naruto pushed his hips up a little and peeled down his trousers. He sat right back down and began tugging on the waistband until it was dangling around his mid-thighs. It was like two pieces of a puzzle connecting when his mother's big, fat, landed on his equally crotch. He proceeded to spread his legs, allowing her to use her feet to continue pulling down his trousers. Once they dangled around his ankles, he shook them off. Now both he and his mother were from the waist down. Minato looked confusedly at his wife and son, wondering why they were causing such a commotion. They were moving quite a bit and he could see them wiggling around under the blanket. There was even a large bulge at the end of the blanket which he figured was a cushion of some sort. Deciding not to raise a question since they obviously looked a lot more comfortable now, he went back to watching the movie. He had no idea that the bulge was actually the duo's discarded trousers. Naruto's heart raced with ungodly lust as he finger-ed his mother under the blanket. There was longer any reluctance from her aside from the spasms in her legs. After all these years, one of his greatest fantasies were becoming reality. Playing with his mother behind his father's back was a major achievement, but doing it when he's nearby was a whole different story. His cerulean blue orbs sparkled with hunger as his mother massaged his in between the two huge spheres of her bottom. Words failed to describe how smug he felt to see his oblivious father staring at the television screen. Oh, how he wanted to rub it in that man's face. Still, he had to be careful here. His mother was a real screamer in bed. His brain was still rattling from all the damage she's done to his eardrums due to how loud she can get while gushing out her orgasms. Thick, feminine cream began oozing out of Kushina's sopping wet snatch. No matter how wrong this situation was, she was getting high off the adrenaline from getting pleasured by her son while her husband was sitting so close to them. Her eyes glossed with ecstasy as her son continued jamming his fingers all the way up inside her before yanking them out. He was so close to making her orgasm that she could already feel the tension bubbling within the depths of her nether region. She hadn't realized until now that she was neglecting her son's terrifyingly huge. Guilt coursed through her to feel him throbbing against her right inner thigh, his mushroom head nuzzling the bottom of her kneecap. She chewed on her bottom lip, still flabbergasted at how huge he was. No mortal man should be this big. Deciding to stimulate him a little, she began stroking him with both hands, while he kept playing with her. The air around them was starting to thicken with UAL excitement, but fortunately her husband hadn't picked up on it. "This movie isn't so bad, but it is boring," said Minato as he turned his head to gaze at his wife and son. There was suspicious movement happening under the blanket, but the Hokage couldn't see it from this angle. However, Naruto's face was a little flushed, while Kushina's jaw was hanging slightly with sweat trickling down her forehead and her cheeks engulfed in a massive blush. While this did raise a few questions in his mind, he decided to write this off as them embarrassed to see the steamy scene that just occurred in the movie. Hell, even he was pitching a baby tent upon sighting the kunoichi on screen. "I think it's pretty good," argued Naruto while wiggling his middle and ring finger inside his mother. "Besides, I want to remember everything for when I meet with Koyuki-chan next month. That reminds me," knowing his mother was almost there, he topped things off by shoving his fingers all the way up to the knuckles and using his thumb to forcefully arrest her. "Are you coming with me, Ka-chan?" I'm coming," whimpered Kushina as she gushed a wave of delicious cream, drenching her son's monster, huge balls, inner thighs, kneecaps, both his feet and hers, and even the living room carpet. Her eyes rolled to the back of her head, her mind just about ready to malfunction. She kept gushing and every part of her body was begging for her to announce her delight with a deafening scream. She struggled and eventually overcame the spasms in her legs, but unfortunately not even with all her willpower could she bite back her s. Swallowing the lump in her throat, she stared directly at the television screen with glossed eyes, hoping her husband would think the sound came from the movie. Fortunately, Minato couldn't hear his wife's erotic s because of the loud samurai fight scene occurring in the movie. The only thing that was able to divert his attention from the screen was his nose being overwhelmed. He scrunched up his face, wondering about the origins of this smell and why he was being so drawn to it. It was intoxicating. Because he was only able to make his wife orgasm once over the course of their marriage, he had no idea this was the smell of Kushina's womanly arousal. His tiny stirred like a ramen noodle as he sniffed around like a lost puppy. I'm gonna call it a night. See you both in the morning. Good night," announced the Hokage with flushed cheeks before rushing off to the bathroom to relieve himself. Naruto chuckled with mirth. Poor Tu-san. Kushina wanted to scold her son for mocking his father, but she simply couldn't be bothered to do so. It also amused her that her husband was getting an erection from smelling her arousal. She could see why the scent was so strong. She had squirted all over her son, herself and the carpet below. However, from this, she was reminded of what her son had in store for her husband. While she did prefer to divorce her husband rather than string him along like this, she wanted to get revenge on him as well. That man has hurt her for years with his absence. His love for the Hokage seat has always weighed more than his love for her. He made her take the roles of both the mother and father for her son while he did paperwork in his office. There were no explanations from his side, just that she should understand that the village is more important than family. For the 22 years she's known him, he's slowly been making her fall out of love with him. Now she was in love with another man. So, you want to cuckold your father, Sochikoi? Purred Kushina with a vulpine twinkle in her violet eyes. Naruto said nothing at first, he just stared at his mother and studied her facial expressions. From the genuine innocence he would see bursting through her features to the wanton mistress he could see begging to be freed. They say the wings of transformation are born of patience and struggle. His patience and struggles have landed him a major victory today. His mother was now undergoing a transformation before his very eyes. Because of his foolish father, his gorgeous mother was reduced from a confident, strong woman to a lonely, miserable, horny housewife. However, by playing with her so religiously, he's been boosting up her self-confidence in the hopes of reviving the red-hot Habareno. However, rather than this moniker being bestowed upon her for her violent streak, he was going to bestow her this moniker for being a hot red-haired MILF. He drooled at the thought of how much of a goddess she will be in the sack. By speaking to him in that beautiful, seductive voice, it's become clear to him that she's finally regaining control of her ability. This could have only been accomplished by breaking her mind, which he's been doing for the past 60 hours. A dark smirk curled to his lips to see she's now getting on board with his plan. Pulling the blanket off of them, he glanced down at his monster before glancing back at her. What do you think, Kaheim? Asked the blonde rhetorically. Kushina hungrily stared at the terrifyingly huge beast pointing up at her with thick cream oozing from its head. She swiped her finger across his urethra and started ing on her finger, savoring his taste. Dropping to her knees, still looking like a regal lady while doing so, she lowered her mouth onto his. Her tongue swirled around the tip to lap up any remaining precum. To her delight, he had a lot left to offer her. Naruto groaned with delight as his mother started ing him off. His eyes met hers as she stared up at him with her cheeks puffed out to ridiculous levels due to the thickness of his massive shaft. Bringing his hands to her head, he curled a few strands of her hair in his fingers and started thrusting his deeper and deeper inside her wet caverns. The living room was now full of her muffled s and his grunts. It felt good to be the blonde mother lover. Kushina-chan, open the door. Minato sighed as he lowered his clenched fist. Last night, while his wife and son were watching Koyuki Kazuhana's romance film, he excused himself to masturbate in the upstairs bathroom. However, once he had finished up with business, he found that the master bedroom was locked. His wife probably had something to do with this. She was an Uzumaki, a seals master, a true seals master, unlike what others claimed him to be. He was just a man who boasted about inventing the Hiraishin no Jutsu, when he had actually stolen Tobarama Senju's Jutsu scroll from the Hokage vault back when he was a teenager. It wasn't just about getting his hands on the scroll. He needed someone to teach him. Hiruzen Sarutobi was furious when he found out about this treachery, but dropped the subject when Jiraiya offered to take Minato on as an apprentice to help him learn the Hiraishin. So, no, he was decent in Fuinjutsu, but an absolute failure when compared to an actual master in the art like Kushina. Anyway, the seals placed outside his bedroom were unlike anything he had ever seen. No matter what he did, he couldn't get the damn door to open. He didn't want to bring this issue up with his wife since she was watching the movie downstairs with their son. Another major problem was that he hadn't slept since he departed from grass country, and he had just ejaculated, so he was struggling to stay awake. Therefore, he decided to spend the night in the guest bedroom. It was morning now and the master bedroom was still locked. Hey, wait, said Minato as he cupped his chin. Didn't I place a Hiraishin seal near our bedroom window for emergencies? I can't believe I forgot about that. It didn't bother him that he would potentially be ruining his wife's sleep. Even if she was a retired ninja, Kushina should be up early. Who was going to cook breakfast if she was lazing around? Besides, this was his bedroom as well and he had the right to come and go as he pleased. Closing his eyes, he sifted through his memories to zone in on the location where he had placed that seal. It was a little difficult finding the correct memory since he had never teleported to this exact seal before. A few seconds later, his eyes shot wide open. A rush of energy coursed through him as he vanished in a yellow flash, but just as quickly came crashing down into a landfill. The Hokage was now waist deep in wet, rancid-smelling trash. Quote! Roared the stinky man. Kushina-chan told me Sochi was going to repaint and strengthen the walls of our bedroom. He must have accidentally scraped off the seal while doing the job. Naruto was always multiple steps ahead of his father. No repainting had been done, nor did he strengthen the walls. The only reason he had mentioned this to his mother was so they had an excuse to give as to why the master bedroom was locked. He had sifted through every inch of the room to ensure there were no Hiraishin seals for his father to use to teleport inside. The seals he had carved on the walls prevented anyone from breaking in via Shunshin no Jutsu as well. The master bedroom belonged to him and his mother now. Infuriated, Minato Hiraishin back inside his home and rushed straight for the bathroom so he could take a long shower. Fortunately, he had a spare set of clothes sealed inside a scroll. XXX. While his father was scrubbing away slime and grime, Naruto was kissing his mother's chin, her jaw, but really nibbling on her earlobe. No place was left behind as his lips came crashing down on her neck, trailing further and further down until he was taking a mouthful of her huge tits. A pop sound filled the master bedroom when the blonde let go of his mother's tit, only to latch onto the other one. Her twitching lips glistened with sweet cream as he played with her juicy S. Wanting to do more, the blonde sent a hand down his mother's body until his fingers were grazing her red pubic hair. He gently tugged on a lone hair, forcing a head-jerking motion from her. To really get her going, he began rolling his palm around in circles, rubbing her painfully erect oris. Then, he swept her off her feet and manhandled her until she was laying on top of him in a very wide position. Her legs and feet rested on either side of his upper chest and shoulders. His hands were full of her gorgeous bubble butt, spreading the two symmetrical spheres, bearing her cunt to him. A jolt of lightning struck every part of her body as he sank his face deep into her crevice. Within no time flat, he was tracing a path from her, to her, down her perineum, until he was kissing her. Violet orbs bulged as her son began teasing her with frenzied flicks, all while digging his tongue into her anus. The cute little nubbin tried escaping back into its hood, but his thumb pressed down on it like a button. Her eyes glossed as took her labia lips into his mouth, then popped them out, only to on them some more. He was sawing up and down between her engorged succulent lips. The deft appendage gradually delved deep inside her, probing the sacred tunnel leading to her womb. She wasn't idle. No sir. Squirming and grinding, she was bucking her childbearing hips repeatedly, smothering his face in big, deliciously juicy cheeks. Her hands shakily met around the base of his monster, the vibrations running through the shaft sending spines down her spine. Her cheeks were puffed out quite far as she was accommodating 9 inches of him inside her oral caverns. This was 2-inch improvement from yesterday because she was now able to consume more than 60% of his humongous shaft. It took considerable control on her part, but now she was no longer gagging on his. However, she knew she had some work ahead of her if she wanted to deep-throat him. She eyed him in earnest, while his tongue slithered around inside her like a snake scoping its victim. Her legs spasmed as she slobbered over the thick beast, her drool illy running down to the base. Then, one of his fingers came busting through the door of her. First came a tremor, then a shockwave, and then an all-out overpowering explosion within her vagina. "CCMMNGGG!" cried Kushina, her muffled scream forcing the intruder in her mouth to throb violently. Feminine juices came rushing down the depths of her cunt and her son wasted no time in lapping up every single drop. Electrical blasts were being fired throughout her body, but he had thankfully wrapped his arms around her trembling hips to prevent her from toppling over. Of course, her son wasn't satisfied with her orgasm, even though it was intense. Scorching jolts of pleasure rippled through her nervous system as his tongue tore through her backdoor entrance. Her eyes bulged, for just a second, as she clenched her anus, trapping his instrument for tasting within the small groovy contours of her dirty hole. This didn't last long, for he pulled her cute little folds apart to maximize the gaping before elongating his tongue with chakra until he was fully extended up her. Her body shook as he gently pulled out before pushing himself back in. He was going slow at first, but within minutes he was slamming his face into her with his stiff tongue digging deeper inside her with each thrust. The slapping noise of his face against her flesh was driving her crazy, so much so that she had all but forgotten that his monster was in her mouth. Heavy, passionate breathing accompanied him eating her and her hungrily eyeing him off. Then, he slammed his hands down on her cheeks, while shoving his tongue so deep that stars appeared in her field of vision. CMMMMNGGGGGG was all that could be heard from Minato's wife as she rolled her hips on her son's face. Another wave of sweet cream gushed from the depths of her. She felt his tongue withdrawing from her anus just in time for him to drink the nectar her vagina had brewed for him. She was having trouble breathing with his hitting her in the back of her throat. Ultimately, the need for oxygen was too great and she was forced to release him. Her son apparently didn't share the same problem since he kept eating her out like a starved animal. Violet orbs sparkled with determination as she took him back into her mouth and went back to slamming her head up and down. Hitherto, Kushina Uzumaki never cared much for numbers. But she absolutely adored 69. XXX. Where were you two? Kushina narrowed her eyes at her husband. What's got your panties in a bunch, Minato? Minato shivered a little from the angered look on his wife's face. Okay, maybe it wasn't such a good idea to start off the conversation like that. Despite the glare being directed his way, his wife was positively glowing today. What he didn't know was that she glowing because their son had been eating out heron for the past 5 hours. Ka-chan and I stepped out in the morning to do some light training. After that, we grabbed some groceries from the market, said Naruto as he nudged his mother's shoulder. Ka-chan here scored us a nice discount. Of course, this was a complete lie. From 2 a.m. until late this morning, Naruto had been playing with his mother behind his father's back. But since they knew Minato was downstairs, they decided to vanish from their home via Shunshin no Jutsu and reappear outside the door to make it seem like they had gone out. Naruto had some food items sealed in a scroll to make this lie 100% believable. It wasn't that big of a deal, cutely murmured Kushina. Anyway, Sochi-kun and I are going to whip up some breakfast. Just relax and do your paperwork in the meantime, Minato. The mother and son made their way to the kitchen, while Minato sighed to himself. Even after all these years, he would turn into a little bitch when his wife got cross with him. At least his son was there to save the day. Naruto was always able to calm Kushina down no matter how angry she got. Shaking his head, he sat down and began doing his paperwork. Not even 10 minutes later, he heard his wife informing him that breakfast was ready. Entering the kitchen, he saw his wife and son sitting side by side, waiting on him to take a seat. He did, and thanked them as they offered him a plate. Breakfast was a quiet affair, but the silence was broken when Minato opened his mouth. Why is our bedroom locked, Kushina-chan? Asked Minato sternly. I wanted to ask you about this yesterday, but didn't want to disturb you while you were watching that movie with Sochi. Why am I not able to open the lock? Naruto decided to answer on behalf of his mother. That is my fault. I installed a new security system via Fuinjutsu, but forgot to add your blood to the seal. This was the same lock system he had installed in his and Makoto's room in the Uchiha compound. Hence, only he and Kushina could open the master bedroom. Minato had no way of getting inside. That'll have to wait, added Kushina coldly, realizing her husband was about to argue. Finish your breakfast, Minato. Then we'll talk about that lock. Turning her head, she batted her pretty eyelashes at her beloved son. Could you pass me that sausage, Sochi-kun? A dark smirk curled to Naruto's lips as he presented his mother with a plate full of chicken sausages. He had told her of this plan yesterday, and now she was about to follow through with it. Minato watched as Kushina took that small barrel of meat in between her pursed lips, ing it right out of her fingers and into her mouth. Initially, he shook his head in mirth because he genuinely thought his wife was being silly for playing with her food. She used to come up with all sorts of funny techniques to feed Naruto when he was an infant. After those fond memories vanished from his mind, did he notice something different about his wife as she brought another sausage towards her mouth? Her violet orbs were half-lidded, fluttering as she blew on the wiener like she was trying to cool it down. Just from this one act, Minato knew there was something else at play here because those sausages were nowhere near as hot as her wife was making it out to be. Then, her tongue came from between her full, luscious lips, ing the food item seductively, before sliding it between her parted lips. Kushina-chan, that is really hot, thought Konoha's leader as he adjusted his pants. Kushina's eyes twinkled with suppressed merriment as the all-powerful Hokage-sama wiggled around in his chair. Like a lioness stalking its prey, her husband's jumpy reaction amused her. However, she couldn't help but feel disappointed with him. She knew it would take far more effort on her part to garner a similar reaction from her son. Speaking of her son, he smirked at her while handing her a cup full of chocolate syrup. Her cheeks colored while her mind raced with wicked excitement. Next, she took a banana from the table and began peeling it. Setting the discarded peel on her plate, she smiled at her husband, who returned the smile. It was then she planted a soft kiss on the fruit, making sure to put some smack in her lips while doing so. Ignoring his shocked look, she fondly watched as her son tilted the cup and allowed rich liquid chocolate to start oozing down the banana. "Thank you, Sochi-kun," whispered Kushina in a low voice, fit for an enchantress. "You're welcome, Ka-chan," said Naruto with a grin. "Enjoy." How straw, Minato was thrown from his thoughts as wife ran her tongue and the thick, rich cream off the banana using little strokes, starting at the bottom of the fruit and working her way up the tip. Kushina-chan. This time, Kushina dunked the banana in the cup and looked her husband with the utmost innocence while inserting it into her mouth. She closed her eyes and raked the thick syrup of chocolatey goodness off with her succulent lips. The rich sweet taste of chocolate was intoxicating and made her want to purr with satisfaction. So rich, so creamy, it reminded her of her son's potent jism. She had to bite back from thinking about his sweet juices luxuriously sliding down her throat. Laughing inwardly to see her husband completely at her mercy, she ran her tongue across her lips to wipe the remaining syrup off. The movement was a little awkward in the beginning because this was the first time she was trying to idly eat a banana. However, the look of approval from her son helped her get into her groove. After lathering the banana back with chocolate syrup once again, she swirled her tongue along its sides before popping it back into her mouth. Shit, thought Minato as he was pitching a baby tent from watching the erotic scene unfolding before his eyes. He was breathing deep. His heart was skipping several beats. His lips parted slowly, a single band of spit connecting them before snapping. Oh, of course he knew his wife was a goddess. Kushina had one gorgeous bubble butt and he had seen it jutting out, stretching the fabric of her kimono when she walked away from him earlier. He was one of the luckiest men on the planet because he had seen her. Unfortunately, he couldn't leer at her big, fat right now since she was sitting away from him. What he could see was a generous amount of cleavage. Just looking at those mountains on her chest could turn any sane man into a puddle of goo. It wasn't just her figure. Her hair was nice and rich, red as a river of blood, flowing freely down her shoulders with cute bangs falling on the sides of her heart-shaped face. Even on a gloomy doom day, she could light up the world with her pretty violet orbs. The only problem was that people feared her because of her legendary temper. He was one of those people. She was Ing-wai, but for some reason she wasn't aware of it. People from near and far would compliment her, but she would accept it half-heartedly. He didn't know his absence was a direct cause of her doubting her beauty. Now, however, She was flaunting her appeal for the first time, her innocent face now turning mysterious and sultry. She was transforming into a woman who understood her femininity, and at this moment he felt that she was too much woman for him. Purred Kushina as she pushed a little more of the banana within her wet caverns. The soft and tender fruit almost melted against her hot tongue. Now almost all of it was in her mouth, but it took almost no effort on her part. This banana was average size-wise, though it was still a little bigger than her husband's itty-bitty PP. Nothing could compare to her son, nothing. All in the years she's been married, not once had she associated food with. However, she was enlightened when her son shoved that blueberry up her, after which he sprayed her with whipped cream and ate it off her body. That night gave birth to her food fetish. Her mind wandered as she began picturing her son stuffing this very banana up her oar. Now he was yanking the banana out of her and making her watch as he ate the feminine juice-caked fruit. She squeezed her thighs together and wasn't surprised to feel fluids dripping down her legs. A rush of pride conquered Naruto's heart to see his mother embracing the drop-dead MILF buried beneath that tomboy persona of hers. She shot him an innocent smile which held intense desire underneath, silently informing him that she was mentally giving him a blowjob right now. He could picture it too. His kneeling mother looking up at him with cute, puffed-out cheeks, all while inhaling every inch of his shaft in her hot mouth. A rattling sound pulled him from his daydream. Both Kushina and her son watched as the Hokage shook in his chair like a gust of wind striking a paper bag. The metal legs were producing a loud scratching noise coupled with the sound of his feet tapping against the marble floor. An almost visible puff of air escaped his mouth as he let out a shuddering sigh, his face redder than a tomato. He was unable to handle watching his wife pretty much ing on that banana like it was a. The yellow flash came in a flash in his pants. It took Minato less than a minute to finish his breakfast. He chewed and chewed, not caring for manners. Naruto and Kushina smirked at the flustered man as they leisurely washed down their food with some juice. Without saying a word, he got out of his chair while holding a napkin against his crotch, trying not to let his wife and son see he had soiled his pants. He then made a beeline for the staircase. "That's strike two, san," said Naruto with a chuckle. Kushina was just laughing hysterically. Words failed to describe the amusement she got out of making her husband cream his pants. It was sweet revenge for how miserable he's kept her. Just from this, she was able to retrieve another chunk of the confidence he had stolen from her over the years. She turned her head, gazing lovingly at her son, the man responsible for giving birth to this new Kushina Uzumaki. Leaning closer to him, she took his handsome face in her hands. Unable to resist her urges, she swiftly tugged on his hand and pulled him out of his chair. The two instantly captured each other in what could only be called a lover's embrace. Her plump lips met his in a passionate kiss, and their mouths quickly opened as their tongues clashed in a battle of dominance. Even with her eager, feminine tongue putting on an incredible performance, she was easily subdued by her son. Naruto was just too skilled for her. While he was shoving his tongue down her throat, she was massaging his chest with her huge tits, pressing her girls against him, using her erect S to arouse him. Her eyes fluttered as his hands slid up her kimono until he was in possession of her big, round. She stood on her toes, leaning closer to him while releasing muffled S into his mouth as he dug his fingers deep into her butt cheeks. Feeling the heat become unbearable for her, she brushed her leg with his, feeling his monster reacting to the inviting touch of her matronly thigh. It took 5 full minutes for them to put an end to their hot and heavy makeout session. However, this was only because Minato would be coming downstairs any minute now. They were still kissing each other, but now they were just affectionately pecking their lips. She began playing with his soft gold hair, while he ran a hand through her long red hair. Meeting his gaze, she stared deep into his cerulean blue orbs, offering him her undying affection. "I feel like I'm free," began Kushina while going through a myriad of emotions. "You've freed me from that prison, Sochikoi. I felt so empowered just now, like I could take on the whole world." "And I believe that you can," said Naruto genuinely. "I'm so proud of you, Kahime." The Uzumaki matriarch pecked her son's lips. Get him the out of our home, whispered the woman in a stony voice. I don't care how you do it. Just make sure he doesn't come back tonight. Why? Asked the blonde, though his mother's facial expressions told him all he needed to know. I'm okay with your plan to cuckold your father, replied the red-haired lady. That little food seduction has helped me grow comfortable with the idea of treating him as a cuckold husband. However, I don't want him nearby when you and I are consummating our relationship. I don't want my first time with you to be in a sleazy hotel room. I want us to be together in the room you were conceived in. She paused here, her voice softening. It's time for you to make love to your mother, Sochikoi. Studying his mother, Naruto sensed not a shred of doubt or guilt from her. Reaching around her childbearing hips, he placed his hands on her waist, his eyes peering into hers as he shot her a charming smile. She returned in kind, her eyes twinkling with unquantifiable love, a love that transcended all laws and boundaries. She was ready for him, and he was sure as hell ready to claim her as his forever. I see, said Naruto. But the thing is, I don't think I can kick him out of the house for one night. Kushina clicked her teeth. Damn it. You misunderstood me, Kaheim, continued Naruto, earning a hopeful look from his mother. I won't be kicking Two-san out of the house for just one night because there's no way I can handle only one night with you. We will make love right now. His eyes sparkled with lust as he grabbed a fistful of her kimono. But then I'm going to be ing the living shit out of you. A tremendous heat blazed through the MILF's nether region, rushing straight to her head. It was like her son was backing her into a corner and she had nowhere to run. Despite exerting dominance over her husband just recently, Naruto was someone who she could never dominate. He was the alpha male of the family, the true head of their household. Her rosy pink S stood at attention, her throbbing, her clenching as she daydreamed of Naruto pounding her into submission. She would be limping for days if he gave her the sort of hardcore she knew he could give her. He had the means of doing it, he had both the size and stamina for it. The brutal ing Sasuke's mother had received from him was still fresh on her mind. It astounded her how Makoto hadn't died from all those hours of, especially after that insane teacher-student anal roleplay. The sound of footsteps quickly broke the couple from their embrace. Kushina sat back down in her chair, while Naruto discreetly sent a shadow clone off elsewhere to enact the next stage of his plan. Minato arrived shortly after this, donning a new pair of pants. He couldn't believe how turned on he got from watching his wife eat that banana. The fact she had put on that show while their son was nearby was rattling his brain. Did she really do that? Or was what he saw just a figment of his imagination? In any case, this only made him horny for his wife, he needed to have her tonight. Hey, Kushina-chan, said Minato with a goofy grin. Do you want to go out tonight? By going out, he meant have. Kushina knew this and wanted to puke from the mere thought of entertaining her husband's tiny. I can't, replied the redhead almost sneering at him. Sochi-kun and I have already made plans. We're going to head out right after breakfast. That excuse was absolute nonsense, but she needed to say something to get her husband off her back so she could roll around in the sheets with their son. Anger coursed through the Hokage as his wife flat out denied him. It wasn't even a polite refusal. He could have sworn he sensed some loathing in her voice. Yesterday, she refused to snuggle with him while watching that movie because she was snuggling with their son under the blanket. Now she was ditching him for Naruto again. He was about to voice his frustrations when the familiar voice of his sensei reached his ears. Naruto nodded at his teacher, who returned the head gesture before glancing over at Kushina. A man of his experience could tell if a woman is satisfied or not, and by Kami was Naruto satisfying his mother. Jiraiya held back tears of joy while discreetly giving the young blonde a thumbs up. Turning his attention to his former apprentice, the hermit saw nothing but a man with a severe case of blue balls. Minato, announced the erotica writer. You're being summoned to explain the Konoha Grass Country Treaty to the clan heads. This was a legitimate excuse, but the meeting wasn't going to be held for another hour. Can't this wait until tomorrow, sensei? With his attention directed at his former teacher, Minato was oblivious to his son giving a "come hither" gesture to his wife. He couldn't see that his son had just yanked down his trousers, nor could he see his blushing wife obediently crawling towards to the whiskered blonde. The cherry on top was that he sat at such an angle that prohibited him from seeing past the kitchen counter. He had no idea that Kushina was now on her knees, worshipping Naruto's 14.5 inches of wrecking steel. Jiraiya, on the other hand, had to force down a perverted giggle. Naruto's lower half was obstructed by the kitchen counter, but he could tell that the gaki was getting his wet by his mother. No, continued Jiraiya with a tone that left no room for debate. You've also been requested to relocate to the Anbu headquarters to finish your paperwork until the Hokage Tower renovations are complete. I tried talking sense into your advisors, but they're completely against you signing classified documents at home. It was a piece of cake to get the advisors on board. After hearing their Hokage-sama was signing paperwork at home, it took them 5 seconds flat to open their mouths. Although he was infuriated, Minato found himself approving his advisor's request. Even if they were family, his wife and son weren't to be trusted with such delicate documents. The thought of making it up to Kushina for his absence had unfortunately prevented him from thinking straight. I understand, said Minato as he wiped his mouth with a napkin. I'll go get a spare set of my clothes from upstairs and then we'll be on our way. He paused here, realizing his wife was no longer present in the kitchen. Hey, where did Kushina-chan go? She went upstairs to get changed while you were talking with Jiraiya-sensei, replied Naruto with a deep smirk buried underneath the pursed lips he was displaying to his father. What he had said just now was a complete lie. His mother was not upstairs, she was busying his monster. A frown marred the older blonde's face. How can I get my spare clothes now? Exclaimed the man. I can't even enter my bedroom because of that new security system you've installed, Sochi. Can't you override the lock? That would not be a wise thing to do, Tu-san, argued Naruto sternly. Ka-chan might be changing upstairs and I don't want to invade her privacy. You'll just have to make do with the clothes you have on for the time being. Don't worry, I'll be sure to send you some fresh clothes once she heads downstairs. Minato wanted to explain that he was the Hokage and that his word was law. However, he realized that he would just be wasting time arguing semantics with his son. Naruto was not going to budge, that much was clear. Fine, gritted out Minato. Just remember to add my blood to the seal later. Naruto stared blankly at his father. Will do. Like hell I will. That bedroom belongs to me and Kaheim now, added Naruto mentally. While the two men were talking, a pop sound could be heard as Kushina detached herself from her son's gigantic. Hot saliva stretched between his shaft and her plump lips in multiple bands. His dripping wet cervix killer shined brightly under the kitchen spotlights. Kissing her way down, she gradually reached his huge balls and took one of them into her mouth. She began stroking him with both hands, all while swishing his balls around inside her mouth. Slowing down her strokes, she lowered her mouth back onto his massive mushroom head. She edged quietly as he performed a thrust, forcing more of him into her wet caverns. Her scalp was being massaged by him, strands of her hair curled in his fingers as he pushed deeper inside her, stretching out her mouth far and wide. She could hear every word being spoken by Minato and Jiraiya, though the occasional squelch of her spread lips slurping down her son's rod distorted the clarity. There was the faintest of gags as she would take more than she could currently handle down her throat. Drool leaked in copious amounts down the remainder of his shaft as she couldn't get all of it down like Makoto could. She proceeded to juggle his huge balls in her hands, enjoying their weight as they bounced on her palms while she slobbered all over his. Thankfully her son had turned the water on in the sink because it was preventing her husband from hearing her muffled s. So far so good, but now it's time to kick things into high gear, thought Naruto as he took a fistful of his mother's hair and began pulling her up and down, thrusting in and out of her mouth. He shot his teacher a glare, gesturing for him to capture his father's attention. Since Jiraiya understood Naruto better than he ever understood Minato, he realized what the younger blonde had planned. Pulling some bullshit small talk out of he engaged Minato verbally while Naruto began roughly bucking his hips into his mother's welcoming face. His swollen balls clapped into his gorgeous lover's chin as he stared at his father. A surge of dark pride hijacked the controls of his nervous system. Here he was in his mother's face while his father sat like a buffoon completely oblivious to it all. 5 minutes in and he started catching his breath. His mother was taking her MILF training seriously and was on her way to becoming a brilliant girls his age just weren't meant to handle him. Meanwhile, Kushina's nails were digging into her son's thighs with her hair splayed over her head as she ed his like her life depended on it. He was no longer making love to her mouth, but her was on fire, burning with lust. Her s were painfully erect, begging to get pinched. This was exciting her even more than yesterday when her son was fingering her under the blanket while her husband laid on the sofa. This could be confirmed with the puddle of juice forming beneath her. Wanting to do more, she quickly untied her obi and relieved herself of her kimono. Massive tits sprang free, bouncing up and down in gratitude as they were released from their silky prison. She wore no bra or panties underneath because she and her son were in the early stage of their relationship where they couldn't keep their hands off each other. Besides, Naruto liked having instant access to her, so he was obviously against her wearing any panties. She wouldn't have even bothered with the kimono, but she didn't want to arouse suspicion from her husband by showing up with their son. Raising herself up on her knees, the Uzumaki matriarch leaned forward, wrapping her huge tits around her son's monster. A few inches and his mushroom head remained within her mouth. It made her tingle when she saw the animalistic lust bubbling in his cerulean blue eyes. Arousal heightening, she started bouncing up and down, sliding his between her heavy s. Pressing her tits together, she slobbered on the 5 inches she had buried in her mouth, while smothering the rest in between her mountains of motherly flesh. After 3 long minutes, his testicles tightened against her palm. Relief washed over her since this act confirmed that he was getting ready to orgasm. It was absurd how much time and effort it took to get him to ejaculate, he had ungodly stamina. She shot a quick glance up to see him holding up a plate against his face to prevent anyone from seeing his eyes squeezing shut from pleasure. Droned Naruto inside his head, his knees growing weak. Prepare yourself, Kaheim. Come for me, Sochikoi, thought Kushina with her violet orbs flickering passionately. Please come for your Kaheim. Squishy noises would have resounded through the kitchen had it not been for the water splashing loudly in the sink. Letting her tits fall from her son's gigantic, one final hard coupled with a ferocious jerk resulted in him erupting in her mouth. He rocked his hips forward, slamming the back of her head against the drawer under the kitchen counter. Stars appeared in her field of vision from getting banged on her head, but she shooed away the light particles because it was time for dessert. Unlike last time when she was unprepared, her precious son was gracious enough to train her and help improve her skills. By channeling chakra from her lungs all the way up her throat, she was able to accommodate a majority of his release without gagging or needing to catch her breath. An adorable escaped her as her son filled her up with so much potent jism that she felt her stomach expanding. All she could think about was the scent of his musky cream, some of which began oozing down her cheeks in slimy little strands as his cum marked her. He was staring down at her with lust-filled eyes, proud of her for being able to devour almost every drop of his release. She only heightened his desire for her when she scooped up the remains of his release and began it clean like a kitten. Meanwhile, Jiraiya smirked over at his apprentice before slapping a hand on Minato's shoulder. Hey, it's time to go. I'm heading out, Sochi, announced the Hokage as he got out of his chair. Kushina-chan still hasn't arrived downstairs, but that's a good thing since I don't have to hear her yell at me for not wanting to stay home. Anyway, be sure to send me 2 sets of clothes. I will most likely have to pull an all-nighter in the Anbu headquarters because of the amount.